All right, everybody, we're back. It's the Jaguar Journal. Good morning. I am Perry White. Glad to have you guys with us. Good morning, everybody out there listening on Talk 107.3 FM across the Baton Rouge capital city area, and everybody watching on our Facebook and YouTube Live. Good morning. Glad to have you guys with us. Want to thank Coach Brittany Williams, the softball coach over at Southern University, to talk to us about the upcoming clinic that should be putting on, looking for talent around the state. But as we continue to move on, we'll talk about talent around the conference, and nobody better to talk that with than my man Zach McKinnell, aka Blue, from FCS Football Central. Good morning, Zach.
What's up, man? Appreciate you having me again.
Man, glad to have you on. You know, when it's time to talk some football, man, we're going to talk some football because I like your IQ and awareness of everything, not just what's going on in the SWAC and the MEAC, but the landscape as a whole when it comes to football. It is enjoyment to be able to have that conversation with someone as we break this down, because the people out there need it to be broken down for us. A lot of times they see it from on the outside, but they need to know what's going on the inside. And when I say the inside, it's understanding who these players and coaches are from these perspective programs around the SWAC. And as we look at the SWAC right now, SWAC Media Day. And first, I want to talk to you about SWAC Media Day. How was it for you, man?
Man, it's always good. I always enjoy it because, one, not only do you get to kind of talk to all the coaches and different players and things like that, but Perry, I mean, you've been. It's kind of like it gives you a chance to reconnect with all the different media members too. Just because, I mean, especially for me covering it nationally, I'm not always able to be at, always the top SWAC game every week. Because sometimes, I got to also go to other games across different conferences, things like that. So it's just a good time to reconnect, man. And I think with so many storylines in the SWAC, like we talked about however many weeks ago it was when I was on the show, man, it was kind of easy to, there was just a lot to talk about to each coach. And then for me, Perry, I like to talk to a lot of coaches off the record just to kind of give me a good idea of like where they really stand, because I think coaches will be more honest with you when it's not on camera. And just for me, as much as the interviews that we get to release are great, man, for me, it's really cool to get that inside information. That way I kind of know where to go with my preseason projections and have some stuff that I can talk about as we get into the season.
Let's jump right into it, and let's look at the all-SWAC selection for second team defense. And looking for starting from that defensive line, we look at a guy like DeMarcus Thompson, Texas Southern, Adrian Hall, Bethune-Cookman, James Gardner Jr. from Florida A&M, and Nick Glenn, Alabama A&M. Let's start there with the D-line and looking at a couple of those guys.
Yeah, I'm actually not super surprised about this. I'll be honest, Perry. With so much turnover, it almost kind of feels weird to be like nitpicky with the second team, right? I mean, I would have been just fine if the SWAC wanted to go just one all conference team, and I would have been just fine with that. So I didn't have any problem with these guys. I will say I think DeMarcus Thompson could be a guy that would be an interesting breakout candidate. He was a transfer from Delaware, had a pretty good year last year. 6'4", 275, really good size. He has the size to move inside in like those pass rushing sets, but I really do think he has the size and ability to make his hay not only at edge, but you can probably move him down to the three in certain situations if you wanted. So I think his versatility there makes him extremely interesting. James Gardner too from FAMU is an interesting one. I think it's big that he got second team Perry, because we kind of talked about that defensive line needing to step up last year. I think there were times where the middle of that defensive line just didn't perform as well as we thought they would. I think you had James Ash there in the middle, which is now since transferred to Auburn. They're going to need someone to have to step up at defensive tackle. You have Westmoreland coming back who at edge. When FAMU's defense is at their best, they have someone who can get to the quarterback. And I think on that second team, I think Adrian Hall Jr. from Bethune-Cookman is someone who's been a little bit overlooked. 6'1", about 265. Last year had a really, really good. Last year had a pretty good year, but the year before, really, really good year as a sophomore. 9.5 tackles for loss, Perry, 3 sacks. Was a transfer from Tennessee Tech, where he saw action as a true freshman as well. So I think all these guys on the second team, Perry, the theme here is guys that have shown flashes of being good, but just haven't been able to break through and have that superstar breakout yet. So, and even with like Glenn, all these guys have the ability, Perry, to make that jump to first team with an excellent season, but they all have certain aspects that I really like as players.
We still stay second team defense. Let's look at the linebackers, and this is Jackson State heavy with Reed Pulliam, Ashton Taylor, and Malik Stenton. Reed and Ashton both Jackson State. Malik Stenton, Bethune-Cookman. Those are the three guys all-SWAC second team at linebacker.
Yeah, I'll say this. I know why they weren't first team because and I'm sure we'll talk about first team later because I think linebacker on the first team was absolutely loaded. But I think there was an argument that you could make for one of these guys from Jackson to be first team, and we'll kind of talk about who I thought they should be over when you look at who made it from last year. But I really, really like what Ashton Taylor brought last year to Jackson. But I think Reed Pulliam, man, has a chance to have a real breakout year, man. I like his size of 6'3", was an all-SWAC selection last year by Phil Steele, had 7 tackles for loss last year, 3.5 sacks. For me, I know people like the linebackers who just have a lot of tackles. You know, they like those 100 tackle guys, the 90, the 120 for some of the better linebackers. But for me, I value a linebacker who can create negative plays. Now, that's also a product of the scheme. But if I have a linebacker who gives me 104 tackles, Perry, but they only give me 2 tackles for loss and maybe half a sack, I'll take the guy who only gives me 60, 70 tackles but has 7, 8, 9, 10 tackles for loss and a handful of sacks. Because I need a guy who is not afraid to go make a play rather than just because we know as football guys, I'd rather have the linebacker that's generating negative plays than the guy who's tackling the running back 5 yards down the field. If you give up 5 yards every play, you know what happens, Perry. They eventually go down and score. So I think both these linebackers from Jackson have a lot of potential. And I think you see another Bethune-Cookman guy here. Perry, we've talked about this Bethune-Cookman team. We talked about it last time I was on the show. This is a team that feels like it's been on the precipice of breaking through. There's been a whole lot of close games, and if they can't get it done, Raymond Woody has been talked about on the hot seat. You see that this team has some individual talent that's been promising. It's just putting it all together and winning those games on the field, which they haven't been able to do the past few years.
And let's look at the defensive back with Shamar Hawkins coming from Jackson State, Blake Davis, Grambling, Herman Brister, the third Southern University defensive back, and Jamil Sanders round up the 4 DBs coming up as second team all-SWAC selection.
Yes, Shamar Hawkins, a massive, I say addition because, if you remember, he hit the portal at one point. And so I think that was a huge ability to get him back. I thought there was a chance Herman could be on first team. I don't know how you felt, Perry, as a Southern guy, but I really, really liked that safety room for Southern. And I thought Herman Brister showed flashes last year of being that first team guy. I think of his performance against Prairie View. I think it's about his performance against Alabama A&M. I thought he had some really, really promising moments. And I think Herman Brister is the guy that I would not be surprised to see on first team as we get to the end of the year. Also with Jamil Sanders, I like what he brings to the table as well. I think FAMU's always going to have good defensive backs, Perry. It's just that is just the nature of life recruiting in Florida. And I think when you look at everything they lost with Kendall Bowler and some of those guys in the back end, that they're going to need someone like him to step up. And I think Jamil Sanders, he had a pretty good year last year, graded out just under 70, according to Pro Football Focus. And so Jamil Sanders is someone I'm looking at to see if he can possibly take a step forward to replace someone like Kendall Bowler on the outside.
Let's look at the all-SWAC selection for second-team offense real quick. Got about 3 minutes before we go to break. But let's look at quarterback Bethune-Cookman, Cam Ramsden. This is an interesting pick because looking around the landscape of the conference, it's a flip of the corner. Who's the second-best quarterback in the conference besides Morgan at Jackson State?
A little surprised here, Perry. Just to make it quick, I would have personally put Mekhi Higgins here. I know he's technically going through a quarterback battle at Alabama A&M, but he was the guy who played in the conference last year, probably second statistically in the conference last year. I thought him, and then Ransom showed flashes, Perry, but I just don't think, for me personally, I would have put Higgins, and I even would have I know he was hurt last year, just based off what he did 2 years ago, I probably would have put Andrew Body above Cam Ransom as well. So that one took me aback a little bit.
Let's look at the running back position. You look at McDowell coming from Prairie View. B.J. Curry, UAPB. You surprised by these 2 picks?
No, I think you can make potentially an argument for Travis Terrell from Jackson. But you look at what everyone lost at running back, Terry. I mean, who else do you really put there? So that I think the kid from Jackson would be the only one that I would potentially argue. But since they had him all first team, all purpose or return specialist or whatever, I just think the SWAC has made a habit of not giving people two honors. So I get why they have it. I will say McDowell, transfer from Campbell, I think could have a big year in Tremaine's offensive scheme.
Looking at the offensive line, Jackson State, Quavian Davis. Coming from Alabama State, Cameron Smith. Taj Martin from Grambling State, and Desmond Penn from Alabama State. Looking at Alabama State, they're getting some guys on this offensive line, and then you add in Tyro Lawrence coming from Alabama A&M.
Yeah, I'm not surprised at all, personally. I mean, you look at the offensive line that Alabama State has coming back. I mean, they return almost every single starter on the offensive line. So I'm not surprised at that at all. And also, Cameron Smith was the highest graded offensive lineman they had last year, 74.9. And then I really think Tyrell Lawrence had a really, really good year at guard. I actually really like him. And I think you could make an argument that he could have been bumped up to first team.
And let's look at the receivers, tight ends that's rounding out all SWAC selection, second team. Coming from Bethune-Cookman, Malik Huggins. Coming from Texas Southern, Trenton Leary. And from Southern University, from the tight end position, Dupree Fuller.
I don't know about you, Perry. I was personally shocked Dupree Fuller wasn't first team. Now statistically, maybe you can make an argument for the kid from Jackson who was first team, but I think talent wise, I think Dupree Fuller should have been first team. I really, really like his potential. I just think he got limited because Southern was kind of trying to figure out their situation at quarterback. If Southern has a set starter at quarterback, I think Dupree Fuller could have a big game. And then at wide receiver, Perry, we just had so much turnover at that position that I think Huggins and Leary were probably deserving there. I don't know if there's too many people you could argue or have a strong argument for to be on those teams over them.
Yeah, I thought Dupree had an opportunity for me. Best hands on the team from last year. I mean, he's a big target. It's the Jaguar Journal. Glad to have you guys with us. Got my man Zach McKinnell from FCS Football Central. Let's talk some All-SWAC selection. We already talked about the All-SWAC second team offense and defense, but we'll take things a little slow as we head into first team All-SWAC. And let's start on the defensive side of the ball, Zach, and let's look at the defensive line, starting out with the preseason Defensive Player of the Year, Kelby Givens, right there on that D-line, making the All-SWAC first-team selection. From Jackson State, you got Jeremiah Williams, Bryce Cage from Grambling State, and Westmoreland from Florida A&M, man. Looking at this, rounding out the defensive linemen.
Yeah, those first three that you named with Cage, Williams, and Givens were, no pun intended, they were Givens. I mean, I don't see how you can make an argument. I think you got Kelby Givens, who by far is the best defensive player in this conference, and I don't even think as much as I love Jeremiah, I do think Jeremiah is probably the best defensive tackle in the FCS. I like just the impact that Kelby's made year after year. And Perry, as a Southern fan, you know this. I mean, it's not like he's had an all-conference, all-American across from him. So he sees double teams consistently, and people scheme for him, and he just continues to wreak havoc. I really like Kelby's game. The one thing I think this year is interesting, Perry, I've seen him in person. I just am very curious to see what he's like as an NFL prospect. Mm-hmm. Like, how do the scouts feel? Because I do think he's a bit undersized for an edge rusher, and I just wonder if you're going to get that kind of like Jordan, like that Jordan vibe. Like a few years ago when Jordan won the Buck Buchanan during the COVID season. Like, yeah, he was a bit small for the NFL. I think you might get that with Givens, but I'm just curious to see. Jeremiah does this thing on the interior. I think Bryce Cage, out of all these first-team guys, Perry, does not get the love that he deserves. He transferred in ahead of last season. I want to say he came from Southeastern Louisiana. And you look at what he did last year, man. I mean, he had like 11 and a half tackles for loss, 4 sacks. He's 6'5", 270 coming off the edge. Probably has the size to move inside in certain situations. I really, really like Bryce Cage from Grambling State. I don't think he gets enough love. And Davian Westmoreland had a solid year last year, but I think this might be more projection, man, because if FAMU is going to be as good as some people think, they're going to need Westmoreland to evolve into that that game changer off the edge, that Isaiah Land, that like whoever you want to play, they have to have someone to get to the quarterback. Because last year, I think Westmoreland was a bit too inconsistent for my liking, and I do think he has the ability to take the step forward this year.
Let's look at the linebacker position. Southern University with a linebacker named to the SWAC all first team selection on defense, and it's Vincent Page Jr. And he's also joined with this by Edwards from Alcorn State and Jenkins from Florida A&M. Talk about that linebacker crew with Vincent Page coming from Southern.
Man, how before we get to even Vincent, man, how big of a return is getting Samarian Edwards back for Alcorn? He hit the portal. He transfers to Norfolk State. Comes back right before the SPAC Media Day. Gets put on first team, obviously because of the season he had. But how big is that for that defense, man? Because that was going to be by far one of the biggest losses for that Alcorn defense. And I think Vincent Page, man, I really, really like what he brings. Again, Perry, what did I tell you? I really like linebackers who create negative plays. And if I'm not mistaken, Vincent had like 10.5 tackles for loss last year, 4 or 5 sacks. He get after the quarterback while also leading Southern in tackles last year. So really, really like what Page brings back now. Navron Jenkins is the guy I was talking about. I don't mind him on first team. I personally would have had one of the Jackson linebackers, probably specifically Reed Pulliam, on first team over him, but still a guy who I think has the ability to maybe have a better year than I'm thinking. 73 tackles last year, 4.5 for loss, 3 sacks. So I think Navron Jenkins here has a chance to kind of prove me wrong, but for me, I think he probably would have fit better on second team if I was personally putting these teams together.
Let's look at the defensive backs. Of course, you get Lewis from Alabama State, Antoine Watts, Bethune-Cookman, T.J. Huggins from Florida A&M, and to round it out, Horatio Johnson as the DB named to SWAC all first team selection from Southern University.
Yeah, I told you, man, that defensive back room at Southern is extremely interesting, man. I mean, you just have so much talent because even guys that weren't on there, Perry, like you looked at what Elijah West is coming back, Herman Brister, Xavier Spencer, Horatio Johnson, like that secondary is really good. And then let's not forget Eric Reed, who played a ton of snaps last year at corner. How experienced is that defensive backroom for Southern? So I'm going to be very, very curious to see what that looks like throughout the year. But I think Southern's secondary, outside of Kelby Givens wreaking havoc off the edge, could be one of the best positional rooms early in the season in the SWAC defensively. I'm very, very curious to see what it looks like. I'm not surprised about that Lewis from Alabama State, a bit undersized, but has a lot of speed coming out of Miami Northwestern, only about 5'9", 160, but he finds a way to get it done. A little bit different mold than what we're used to seeing from Alabama State, right? We're used to seeing those 6'2", 6'3" corners come out of there. But I think the two kids from Florida, man, I really, really like their game. T.J. Huggins, I want to take you back, Perry. If you remember in that Norfolk State game early in the year, we talked about the corner opposite of Kendall Bowler getting picked on by Norfolk in that game. It was because T.J. Huggins wasn't playing. And he was that opposite corner last year, actually led FAMU in interceptions with 3 interceptions, had about 20 tackles out there on the island at corner. He's 6'3", 185, man, the transfer from Tulane. I think I really, really like T.J. Huggins' game, and I think he could have a potential really breakout year. And then I like what Antoine Watts brings as safety for Bethune-Cookman. If I'm not saying he was a transfer from Albany State and had a really, really good year last year at that safety spot. So no complaints about this first-team secondary.
For everybody out there, that is the voice of my man, Zach McKinnell, a.k.a. Blue FCS Football Central. We're talking all-SWAC selection, football selection at SWAC Media Day. They put out first team and second team. We've already did second team. Now we're on first team defense. But when we come back from outside of this break, when we get to the top of the hour, we'll look at the all-SWAC first team selection on offense as well as the preseason offensive and defensive player of the year. Glad to have you guys with us this morning. Got my man Zach McKinnell from FCS Football Central on here. Good morning, Zach.
Good morning, man.
You know, as we go through and we study talking about all-SWAC selection, we went through the all-SWAC second team offense and defense, and we just wrapped up all-SWAC first team defense. Now let's look at all-SWAC first team offense, and it starts with quarterback Jacobian Morgan, who comes in as the preseason offensive player of the year.
Yeah, I wasn't super surprised. It's always going to go to the quarterback. And I know some people have their reserves about Jacobian, especially with just the the weird quarterback rotation that started the year. That he gets banged up against Southern in the SWAC championship, and then Zai comes in and wins that game, but then he ends the season so high with that Celebration Bowl MVP. I just look around the conference, and I understand some people might not love Jacoby and Morgan's game, but my question to those people would be, who would you pick? Like, what Alabama A&M has Higgins. I don't think you could put Higgins over Morgan. Alabama State has Body, who missed all of last season. Alcorn doesn't have a returning starter. Bethune-Sky was second team, but you won't put him over Morgan. FAM doesn't have a returning starter. Grambling doesn't have a returning starter. Valley doesn't have a returning starter. PV doesn't have a returning starter. Jalen Woods for Southern only started, 4 or 5 games last year? Texas Southern starting quarterback got hurt in week 1 last year, and UAPB doesn't have a returning starter. He has to be first team. So I think Jacobian is a lot better than a lot of people expect. I think he thrives in the system that Jackson has, and I don't think there's anything wrong with being a game manager and fitting the offense that it surrounds you.
Let's look at the running back position. Alcorn State, Jacorian Sewell, and from Florida A&M, Thad Franklin Jr. Didn't think I would see a Florida A&M guy from the running back position because they have been a pass-happy offense, but seeing Thad Franklin making that first-team All-SWAC selection at running back made me turn my head a little bit.
Yeah, I did too. Listen, I thought Sewell was a lot. I think he had an outstanding year for Alcorn. I mean, Perry, when do we not see Alcorn have at least one good running back? Mm-hmm. Alcorn is always going to have a running back, and I think Sewell coming back was massive. And the funny part is they actually pair him with Reggie Davis, who transferred in. He was the starter at Chattanooga last year. They have 2 starting level running backs coming in. I think what helped Thad Franklin is the turnover, Perry. Is the SWAC just lost so much top end talent, and also too there were some really good running backs that got banged up. I think Thad Franklin here for preseason makes sense. He did show that he has the potential, Perry, to have a big year, but it's a little tough in my opinion, Perry, when you have a first team all conference running back who only topped 100 yards one time last season. The only time he topped 100 yards was against Bethune-Cookman, where he went for 195 and 3 touchdowns. It was an outstanding performance. But Perry, every other game last year, he never topped 80 yards. So I think it just shows how much youth and new faces we're going to see at the running back position.
Let's look at the offensive line position, the big boys up front in this first team All-SWAC. You look at DeAndre Towns Blue, Jackson State, Charles Davis, Florida A&M, Ashton Gabriel from Florida A&M, and then Ronald Brown, Alcorn State, along with Desmond Daniels from Alabama State.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I mean, Perry, I'm always going to have my opinions on the offensive line. No way Desmond Daniels should have been first team. Put whoever you want there. I think I talked about how I really like Cameron Smith from Alabama State. I think just flip them, if anything. I don't think Daniels had that type of year last year. I don't mind any of the other selections, really. I mean, Towns Blue, really, really good offensive line for Jackson. I was really high on him when he transferred in from Lackawanna. I really do like Charles Davis. I think Ashton Grable has an argument to be a top 10 interior offensive lineman in the FCS. And I thought Ronald was probably the best offensive lineman that Alcorn had last year. So no surprise there. I would probably flip Daniels and Cameron from Alabama State there.
And then looking at the guys at the wide receiver, Nathan Rampart, who transferred in from Mississippi Valley to Jackson State, Jonas Fertillion at Jackson State, and then Marvin Landy, Jackson State at the tight end position. Morgan's going to have some weapons to throw it to, isn't he?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Everyone's got their complaints about Morgan, but bro, he has the best wide receiving core in the conference. Has one of the best offensive lines. I mean, I don't know what everyone wants to see there. I think this was easy, man, with Rembert and Fortillion. I just don't even know if there's an argument. Rembert over 1,000 yards last year at Valley, man. I don't think either one of us thought Valley had a quarterback. I don't know if they had a quarterback that threw for 1,000 yards, man. If I combined across the 3 quarterbacks they put out there to play, Fortillion really came into his own late last year, especially in that Celebration Bowl. They're kind of a perfect complement too, Perry. I think you have the slot guy in Rembert, and you got an outside guy with some height with Fortillion. But again, Perry, I like Marvin Landy at tight end, but in my opinion, I don't think you can look at the film and say Dupree Fuller's not a better overall player there. Mm-hmm. So I personally would have had Dupree Fuller first team, But I think I think you could have them any way you want. But I think Fuller, for me, when we released our FCS tight end rankings, Fuller was 11th for me in the FCS. So I find it hard that he's not first team.
And then you're looking at the specialty. What are your thoughts on Travis Terrell Jr. there?
Man, Perry, one of my favorite players to watch in the country. I think the way that they could use them, this really makes me excited because you can use them as kind of like a gadget guy. You can put them. I think they can put them at quarterback in the Wildcat and run some different things with them. I think you can put them in the slot and make them more of a slot wide receiver. You can put them on punt return, kick return. You can put them at full time running back. You could do so much with him. Just the key for Travis Terrell is just to get him in space, right? And that's going to be the big thing. Is just I don't think you should waste his talent running him in between the tackles because he's not that big. Put him in space and let him utilize his speed, quickness, and agility because the way he can make people miss and the way he reads the field in open space is amazing. Man, he was a second-team All-Purpose All-American for us at FCS Football Central. He was just behind a guy, Perry, that played quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and had over 1,000 kick return yards. Kind of hard for Travis Terrell to beat that, to be fair, at All-Purpose. So he was second-team All-Purpose, which shows you how good he is, man, just as a true sophomore, Perry, to be an FCS All-American already.
And I gotta go here with it, talking about even with players coming in. Of course, it was reported this week that Trey Holly, the all-time leading high school rusher in Louisiana State football history, has now since come from LSU to Southern University. Your thoughts on being able to add a guy like Trey Holly to the roster?
I think it's huge because for me, I look at the running back room for Southern. They always seem to find somebody, right? So I think even if you don't add on Perry, I think y'all would have been fine just because I trust just the development of running back there. But I think losing the kids you guys lost to Tennessee State was a pretty big one. And then on top of that too, you guys had another one that transferred to Incarnate Word, if I'm not mistaken, who's like a late ad there. But I think Trey Holly could come in and contribute immediately. I know there's a lot of people who were talking about, he didn't play last season. He was in a backup role as a true freshman. But, I mean, even in his limited action as a true freshman, if I'm not mistaken, he was the SEC Freshman of the Week. He had 91 yards on 6 carries against Army, I think. And so I'm going to be very interested to see what he does. And this is a kid, Perry, you don't accidentally rush for 10,000 yards in high school. It's unbelievable. And I think with Southern, he's going to get a lot of touches. The question mark, though, Perry, is at 5'7", can he stay healthy? And that's going to be the question. But I trust Southern to develop running backs. They're always going to have a good running back. And I just think Trey Holly, at least, worst case, Perry, if he doesn't start, he raises the floor of the room. And I think that's what I try to get people to look at when you look at transfers. Even if it's not a starter, does it increase the depth and raise the floor of the room? Because we know in SWAC play, you are going to have some depth, especially at key positions like running back, where the wear and tear is so heavy on these kids' bodies.
With the addition of Trey Holly to Southern's roster now, and we're looking around the conference, what would he be the most impactful new add to a program in the conference? If not, who would be the most impactful new add to a roster around the conference?
Okay, the only reason I would push back on that, Perry, is because running back is probably not a very impactful position. And I say that because, Perry, and as football guys, if I say, Perry, I'll give you a roster where your biggest question mark is running back, or I'll give you a roster where your biggest question mark is quarterback, you are never going to take the question mark at quarterback over the question mark at running back, right? And I think when you look at some of the quarterback additions like Micah Hagan, how can you not say he's going to be the most impactful if he wins that starting quarterback job at Alabama A&M? Because we've seen, Perry, we have teams that have had good running backs. We've had teams that have had good wide receiving cores, good defenses in Alabama State, right? How big, and Alabama State's had some running backs, Perry, but how big would it have been if they would have had a quarterback a handful of years ago? How many SWAC championship appearances could they have had if they would have just found a quarterback? So I think when you look at Micah Hagan, you look at the handful of quarterbacks that FAM added, those guys are probably guys I'll look at to be the most impactful, just because of the importance of the position that they play. And I think the other one could be, I think Holly could be in that conversation, but then you also got someone like a Jalen Ware for Jackson State on the defensive line. I think he could be huge for them because Jeremiah Williams has to have somebody next to him to take away some of the attention. Because if you don't, they're just going to try to triple team Jeremiah on the inside. And then, Perry, look at all the additions that PV added. I mean, how many impactful guys could they have added there? Because they're going to probably have a new starter at, I mean, I think you would probably say almost every single position. And so how big is that? So I don't know if Holly would be the most impactful just because of the positional value there. But I do think if you look in terms of top transfers, if he wins the starting job here, he has the potential to be one of the best transfer additions of the offseason.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of Alabama State some years ago when they added Isaiah Crowell from Georgia and the impact he made for Alabama State. I'm looking at this and I'm hoping Trey can have that same impact as he gets himself back into football shape and get things rocking and rolling for the Southern Jaguars. All right, Blue, as we reach the end today, man, let the people know how can they keep up with you. Football season is here. You're pumping out stuff left and right for them to want to keep up with what you're pumping out because it's not just SWAC. We're talking about the Southland, too, for people that's out there and all the FCS as a whole. Give the people some information out there to keep up with you, Blue.
Yeah, man, SBS Football Central on si.com/college/FCS, the Blue Bloods on YouTube, all podcasts here on platforms, and then on social media, man, trying to keep up with it all. There's transfer portal news, there's preseason All-American teams, there's individual team previews, conference previews, man. We got it all at FCS Football Central, man. And like I always tell you, man, I appreciate you having me.
Real quick before I let you go, anybody from the SWAC on your preseason All-American team?
Oh, yeah. Come on, man. You know Kelby Gibbons' first team. You already knew that. Like, so just in terms of SWAC players on our All-American team, real quick, we had Kelby Gibbons' first team defensive line. Jeremiah Williams was actually first team defensive line. You also go into the MEAC, had Eric Hunter from Morgan State on the first team too, and then also Travis Terrell, all-purpose from Jackson State, and then Nathan Rembert was a wide receiver from Jackson on the third team as well. And we got some MEAC guys thrown in there on second team. We had two defensive backs from the MEAC on second team, and Gerard Washington from South Carolina State, and Malcolm Reed at safety from North Carolina Central.
Blue, man, I appreciate you, man. As the season continues to creep closer and closer, we'll be having more and more conversations about news that is out there, man. Thank you for joining. That is the voice of my man, Zach McKinnell. Thank you, Zach.
Absolutely, man.
All right, everybody, let's get ready to take a break. When we come back on the other side, we're going to have the Southern University head football coach, Terrence Graves, to talk to us about fall camp, SWAC Media Day, and whatever else with the news headed into as we get ready for the first football game of the season over in Atlanta for the MEAC SWAC Challenge against North Carolina Central. So you guys stay tuned. We'll be right back. More of the Jaguar Journal.